The night my husband died, I didn't just lose the man I had shared my life with. I inherited a stack of debts I never knew existed. Before I even had time to grieve, the hospital billing office was already calling. Credit cards I had never seen. Loans I had never signed. And numbers so large I had to read them twice to believe they were real. I buried my husband that week, and the very next month, I started paying for secrets he never told me about. I was 73 years old, standing in my kitchen with a calculator and a legal pad, trying to make sense of figures that didn't fit the life I thought we had. For 42 years I believed we were careful. We didn't take fancy vacations. We drove used cars. I packed my lunch when I was still working at the hardware store. I thought we were modest and steady. Turns out we were drowning. The first statement I opened showed a balance of $38,000. The next one was worse. There were personal loans from online lenders I had never heard of. A second mortgage filed against our house 5 years earlier. My name wasn't on most of it, but in our state, that didn't matter much. What was his became mine. When I called the bank, the young man on the line spoke slowly, like I might not understand. "Sir, these accounts were active for several years. Several years. While we ate dinner together. While we sat on the porch in the evenings. While he told me not to worry about money." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just wrote everything down in neat columns. Total debt, $247,000. Our savings account had $19,400 in it. My son, David, came over the following Sunday. He stood in the living room, looking around like he was assessing property instead of mourning his father. "You'll probably have to sell," he said flatly. "There's no way you can handle that on your own." He didn't ask how I was sleeping. He didn't ask if I'd eaten. My daughter, Carol, was kinder in tone but not in substance. "Dad always handled the finances," she said. "Maybe you just didn't understand what he was doing." I understood enough to know I had been lied to. I made a decision that week. I would not declare bankruptcy. I would not let the house go. That house held every birthday, every Christmas morning, every ordinary Tuesday of our marriage. If there was a way to pay it back, I would find it. So I tightened everything. I canceled cable. Sold the second car. Took in a renter for the spare bedroom. At 73, I went back to work part-time at the same hardware store where I had retired 8 years earlier. $500 a month. That was the minimum I could manage across all the accounts without missing a payment. $500 every month, no matter what. Neighbors started talking. I heard it at the mailbox one afternoon. "It's sad," Mrs. Halpern whispered to another woman. "All that debt. You'd think she'd known." I kept my back straight and walked inside. What hurt more than the money was the silence. My children stopped visiting as often. Conversations turned into lectures. "You should have known. You should have checked. You should have done something." Every month I mailed those checks. Every month I wrote his name on the memo line of my ledger, just to remind myself why. 10 years passed like that. 10 years of scraping and counting and living small. The balance slowly dropped. Not fast, but steady. And then, one Tuesday morning, while I was making oatmeal and listening to the local news, the phone rang. "Is this Mr. Harold Bennett?" the woman asked. "Yes. My name is Attorney Lisa Morgan. I'm calling regarding your late husband's estate." I gripped the counter. "There appears to have been a mistake. There appears to have been a mistake." That's what the woman said. Calm voice. Professional. Like she was correcting a typo instead of rewriting 10 years of my life. I pulled out a chair and sat down. "What kind of mistake?" "My name is Lisa Morgan. I'm an attorney representing a limited partnership your late husband was involved in. His estate file was recently reopened. My husband didn't have investments, I said. He had debt. Yes, sir. On the surface, that's how it appeared. The debts tied to his name were capital contributions to a commercial real estate development. The project was tied up in litigation for years. It recently settled. I gripped the edge of the table. Are you telling me he owed money, or that he owned something? A pause. I'm telling you that after settlement and liquidation, there is a remaining balance owed to his estate in the amount of $312,000. The refrigerator hummed behind me. The stack of bills sat on the counter like it always had. That can't be right, I said quietly. It is. We've been trying to locate you. The original executor passed away last year. When the file was reviewed, you were listed as sole beneficiary. 10 years. 10 years of sending $500 every month. 10 years of patching the roof instead of replacing it. 10 years of oatmeal dinners and skipped doctor visits. After we hung up, I didn't feel relief. I felt tired, and angry in a way that didn't make noise. If this was true, then my husband hadn't just left me debt. He had left me in the dark. I called my son, David. Dad's estate was handled years ago, he said quickly. Apparently not, I told him, and explained what little I understood. He went quiet. Then his tone changed. Well, if that money's real, we should talk about managing it. You don't need that much at your age. We could invest it. Maybe set something aside for the kids. He didn't ask how I was. Carol called later. You need to be careful, she warned. Maybe Dad did something shady. That could explain the debts. For 10 years they had treated me like I'd failed. Like I should have known better. Now there was proof I hadn't known everything, and still I was the one being cautioned. 2 days later I drove downtown to meet the attorney in person. Small office. No marble floors. Just paperwork and quiet. She showed me the documents. My husband's signature on agreements dated 15 years back. Letters addressed to him alone. A note requesting all correspondence remain private. He listed you as beneficiary, she said gently. But not as participant. Separate. That word settled heavy in my chest. He had chosen to carry this without me. Whether it was pride, fear, or something else. I didn't know. When I stepped outside, the air felt sharper. For a decade I believed I was cleaning up a reckless mess. Now I wasn't sure what I had been paying for. And I wasn't sure which truth hurt more. I drove home from that meeting with the attorney in a kind of quiet daze. The road was the same one I'd taken for years, but it didn't feel familiar. Every red light gave me too much time to think. $312,000. After 10 years of scraping by, the number didn't feel real. It felt like someone else's story. That night I pulled out my ledger. The same spiral notebook I'd been using since the month after Thomas died. Every payment listed in neat blue ink. Date. Creditor. Amount. Remaining balance. I added it all up again. In 10 years, I had paid just over $60,000 toward principal and interest. The balances were down to a little under $100,000. I was closer to the end than I had ever been. If the attorney was right, I could wipe it all out tomorrow. But I didn't. Instead, I sat there staring at his signature on the partnership agreement she'd photocopied for me. Thomas Bennett. Confident, looping handwriting. Why hadn't he told me? We had shared a bed for 4 decades. Shared meals. Shared grief when my mother passed. Shared pride when the kids graduated. And all that time he had been involved in something big enough to require loans and second mortgages, and I never knew. The next morning David showed up unannounced. He didn't take off his coat. Just stood in the living room like he was about to inspect something. I've been thinking, he said. You shouldn't rush into anything. That kind of money needs a plan. I haven't touched it, I said. Well, good. We should meet with a financial advisor. Someone I know. You could move in with us eventually. Sell this place while the market's high. There it was again. My life rearranged before the money had even arrived. I'm not selling, I said evenly. He frowned. Dad nearly bankrupted you with that house. No, I replied quietly. Your father nearly bankrupted me with secrets. He didn't like that. I could see it in the way his jaw tightened. Carol called that afternoon. You need to think about fairness, she said. If there's money, it shouldn't just sit with you. Dad would have wanted us included. I almost asked her how she knew what he would have wanted, since he hadn't told any of us what he was doing in the first place. Instead, I said, we'll talk about it later. By evening, word had traveled further than I expected. Mrs. Halpern stopped me at the mailbox. I heard you're coming into some money, she said, smiling too wide. Well, isn't that something after all you've been through? Small town. Nothing stays quiet. I walked back inside and locked the door. For 10 years, I had carried the weight of shame. The old man who didn't know his own finances. The widower who got fooled. Now there was money attached to the story, and suddenly everyone had advice. That night I sat at the kitchen table again, just like I had the night he died. Only this time, the numbers in front of me didn't mean survival. They meant choice. And for the first time in a long while, I realized something simple. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. The money hadn't even arrived yet, and already I could feel it changing the air around me. David called again the next morning. I've set up an appointment with my advisor for Thursday, he said, like it was already decided. You shouldn't make plans with my money, I told him. There was a long silence. It's not just your money, Dad. That word sat between us. Not just yours. For 10 years, I said slowly, I wrote checks every month. $500. Did you ever offer to help? You never asked. I shouldn't have had to. He exhaled sharply. This isn't fair. Fair. I almost laughed. Fair would have been knowing the truth while your mother was still alive. Fair would have been not spending a decade believing I had failed. After I hung up, I went down to the bank. Not to deposit anything. Just to ask questions. I wanted to understand how the transfer would work, what taxes might apply, whether creditors could claim anything once I paid them off. The young banker looked at my account history and raised his eyebrows. You've been very consistent, he said. I didn't have a choice. Back home, I pulled out every statement from the past 10 years. I spread them across the dining room table. The late fees from the early months when I didn't yet understand the due dates. The interest rates that never seemed to drop. The refinance paperwork I signed when I thought I might lose the house. I had carried it alone. And that was when another thought began to bother me. If Thomas had known this investment might pay off one day, why let me struggle like that? Why not tell me, hold on. There's something coming. Unless he hadn't known. Unless he'd gambled, and I'd paid the price. Carol showed up that weekend with a casserole I didn't need. She set it on the counter and looked around the kitchen like she was measuring square footage. You don't have to be defensive, she said. We're just trying to protect you. From what? From making emotional decisions. Dad always handled the big things. And how did that turn out? I asked quietly. She didn't answer. Before she left, she said something that stayed with me. If you keep all of it, people will talk. They already do. That evening I stepped out onto the porch. Same wooden boards Thomas and I had sanded ourselves 30 years ago. The railing still needed paint. I had postponed it because paint cost money. For 10 years, I had been the old man scraping by. Now I was about to be the old man who came into money. I realized something uncomfortable. My children weren't grieving the truth about their father. They were calculating. And for the first time, I began to wonder whether paying off the debt was the only thing I needed to settle. Because money can reveal things that poverty keeps hidden. And I wasn't sure I liked what I was seeing. The transfer came through 3 weeks later. I was standing at the kitchen sink when the bank notification lit up my phone. I dried my hands slowly before I looked at it. The number sat there, plain and undeniable. $312,000. For a moment, I didn't move. I just listened to the water ticking in the pipes and the refrigerator humming behind me. Then I did the first thing I had promised myself I would do. I paid every debt. One by one, I logged into each account. I watched the balances drop to zero. The second mortgage. The credit cards. The personal loans I'd never signed. With each confirmation scream, something inside my chest loosened. By noon, the house was mine again. No liens. No quiet threats hiding in envelopes. No $500 obligation hanging over the first of every month. I sat back in my chair and let the silence settle. For 10 years, the first of the month had felt like Judgment Day. Now it was just another square on the calendar. I didn't call David. I didn't call Carol. They found out anyway. David showed up that evening, angrier than I'd ever seen him. You paid it all off without talking to us. It was my debt. It was Dad's estate. That affects all of us. I looked at him carefully. The debt affected me. He ran his hand through his hair. You should have at least discussed how to handle it. There are tax implications. Investment strategies. I handled it. He stared at me like he didn't recognize the man in front of him. Carol called later that night. She didn't yell. Her voice was colder. So what now? You just sit on the rest? I don't know yet. Well, I hope you're not planning to make any impulsive decisions. People your age get taken advantage of. People your age. 10 years ago, I had been old enough to shoulder their father's mistakes alone. Now I was too old to manage my own money. The next Sunday, neither of them came for dinner. Neighbors began dropping hints. Mrs. Halpern mentioned her grandson's student loans. Mr. Kelly from down the street casually brought up a church renovation fund. It wasn't outright asking. It was circling. I realized something uncomfortable. When I was struggling, I was pitied. When I had money, I was evaluated. That week, I went through the house room by room. Not looking for repairs anymore, but for truth. In the back of the hall closet, I found a small metal lockbox I hadn't opened in years. Thomas's handwriting labeled it insurance. Inside were old policy papers, and a folder I didn't recognize. Bank statements. Separate from ours. Dated the same years he had been taking out loans. My hands went cold as I flipped through them. Regular transfers. Not to an investment firm. To an individual account. A woman's name I had never seen before. The air in that hallway felt thinner. The debts. The secrecy. The request for private correspondence. I stood there a long time, holding papers that didn't just explain money. They suggested betrayal. And for the first time since the attorney's call, the $312,000 didn't feel like resolution. It felt like evidence. I carried the folder into the kitchen and laid it flat on the table. The name on the account was Margaret Ellis. I said it out loud once, just to hear how it sounded in my house. The statements were dated over 8 years. Small transfers at first. 500 here. 800 there. Then larger amounts during the same months our credit cards had spiked. During the same months I remembered Thomas saying, "We'll be tight for a while." Tight. I sank into the chair. I wasn't a fool. I had lived long enough to recognize patterns. You don't keep a separate account private unless you don't want it found. I didn't call my children right away. I didn't confront anyone. I just kept reading. There were notes scribbled in the margins of one statement in Thomas's handwriting. Temporary. Will fix. Don't tell H. Don't tell H. For 10 years, I had carried shame over debts I thought were reckless investments. Now it looked like some of that money had been going somewhere else entirely. The next morning, I drove back to Attorney Morgan's office. She listened quietly while I placed the folder in front of her. I found this, I said. She adjusted her glasses and flipped through the pages slowly. This is a personal account, she said. Not connected to the partnership. Can creditors come after this? I asked. No. These transfers are from his personal funds before his death. Legally, there's no action to take unless fraud can be proven, and even then, it would be complicated. I nodded. What do you want to do? She asked gently. I thought about that. At 73, I wasn't looking for courtroom drama. I wasn't interested in dragging a stranger's name through town. I just wanted the truth to sit still in my hands long enough for me to understand it. Can you tell me if she's still alive? I asked. She hesitated. I can look into it. 3 days later she called me back. Margaret Ellis had passed away 6 years ago. No spouse. No children. Lived 2 towns over. Rented apartment. Modest income. There was no dramatic second family. No hidden mansion. Just a quiet life that intersected with my marriage in a way I hadn't known. I sat on the porch that evening and let the wind move through the trees. I tried to be honest with myself. Thomas had not just hidden money. He had hidden a part of himself. Maybe it was love. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was responsibility for someone he felt he couldn't abandon. I would never know now. David came by later that week with a spreadsheet he'd printed. We should talk about estate planning, he said. I looked at him for a long moment. For 10 years, I said calmly, I paid for things your father never explained. I just discovered there were other explanations I'll never get. He blinked, confused. What does that have to do with anything? Everything, I said. I realized then that the money wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was accepting that the man I had defended in my own mind for a decade, had not defended me at all. And now I had to decide what kind of legacy I was willing to leave behind. Because secrets have a way of echoing, unless someone chooses to end them. I didn't tell David or Carol about Margaret Ellis. Some truths don't heal when they're shared. They just spread. Instead, I went to the cemetery one quiet Thursday morning. I stood in front of Thomas's headstone, the one I had chosen with careful hands and a tighter budget than I admitted to anyone. Who was she? I asked the stone. The wind moved through the grass. No answer came. I wasn't there to accuse him. I had done enough of that in my kitchen. I was there because I needed to decide whether I was going to let his silence shape the rest of my life. For 10 years, I had paid for what I thought were his mistakes. Now I knew some of those debts might have been choices. I drove home feeling older, but clearer. That weekend, I invited David and Carol over. Not for dinner. For a conversation. They sat across from me at the same table where I had once helped them with homework. David folded his arms. Carol kept checking her phone. I've paid off all the debt, I said. The house is clear. David nodded. Good. Now we can talk about the rest. We are going to talk, I said evenly. But not about dividing anything. Their faces shifted. I spent 10 years living small. Not because I had to, but because I believed I was responsible for your father's financial mess. I carried that alone. We didn't ask you to, Carol said quietly. No. You didn't. Silence hung between us. I'm not angry about the money, I continued. I'm disappointed in how quickly it became the only topic. David's jaw tightened. That's not fair. It is, I said calmly. In 10 years, neither of you asked how I managed those payments. Now you want spreadsheets. They looked down. I will take care of myself, I went on. I will make my own decisions. And when I'm gone, what's left will be distributed according to what I believe is right. Not what's expected. Carol's voice softened. So we're being punished? No, I said. I'm ending a pattern. They didn't understand fully. Maybe they won't until they're my age. After they left, the house felt quiet but not lonely. The following week, I met with Attorney Morgan again. We drafted a new will. Simple. Clear. No hidden clauses. No private accounts. A portion would go to David and Carol. A portion to my grandchildren for education. And a portion, a meaningful portion, to a local housing nonprofit that helps elderly widowers avoid foreclosure. Because no one should spend a decade believing they failed when they were simply uninformed. When the documents were signed, I felt something settle inside me. Not revenge. Not triumph. Just balance. For the first time since that phone call, the money no longer felt like evidence. It felt like responsibility. And I intended to handle it differently than Thomas had handled his secrets. The last thing I did before closing that chapter was visit the hardware store. Same narrow aisles. Same smell of lumber and fertilizer. I hadn't worked there in 2 years, but they still greeted me like I belonged. I walked slowly past the paint section and bought 3 gallons of white exterior paint and new brushes. That Saturday, I painted the porch. Not because I couldn't afford to hire someone anymore, but because I wanted to remember what it felt like to fix something with my own hands. Halfway through, David pulled into the driveway. He stood there watching me for a moment before speaking. You don't have to do that yourself, he said. I know. He stepped onto the porch carefully, like it might crack under him. I've been thinking about what you said. I kept brushing paint along the railing. I didn't realize how much you carried, he admitted. I guess, we assumed you were fine. I wasn't, I said. But I managed. He nodded slowly. I'm sorry. It wasn't dramatic. No tears. Just a quiet acknowledgement. For a man his age, that was something. Carol came by later that week with the grandkids. She didn't mention money. She helped me clear out the garage instead. We found old fishing rods, Thomas's tool belt, a box of photographs we hadn't looked at in years. At one point she held up a picture of her mother and father laughing on this same porch. They look happy, she said. They were, I answered. People can be happy and still keep secrets. She didn't argue. Life didn't turn into a fairy tale after that. There were still awkward dinners. Still moments when money hovered in the background like an uninvited guest. But something had shifted. The first month I didn't write a $500 check, I woke up early out of habit. I walked into the kitchen expecting that old knot in my stomach. It wasn't there. Instead, I made coffee and opened the window. The air moved through the house without carrying fear with it. I don't pretend I understand everything Thomas did. I don't excuse it either. I've made peace with the fact that I'll never have the full story. What I do have is this house. Clear and steady. My name alone on the deed. I have a will that tells the truth. No hidden clauses. No private accounts. And I have the quiet knowledge that when the lawyer called that morning, it wasn't just about money. It was about finally seeing my life clearly. 10 years of payments taught me endurance. The phone call taught me something else. You can carry someone else's secrets for a long time without knowing it. But the moment you see them for what they are, you get to decide what you carry next.